2021 sees the 30th anniversary of the Kinesiology Federation. And as part of our celebrations, we're speaking to people who founded the Kinesiology Federation, people connected with it, and other kinesiologists from the wider kinesiology world. I'm Phil Clubley. I'm the current chairperson of the Kinesiology Federation. And it's my pleasure today to be talking to Terry Larder. Terry is an honorary member now of the Federation, but she served on the policy board for 10 years as the chairperson, and also founded and is head of Classical Kinesiology Institute, her own school, which has an amazing presence in the kinesiology world. Hello, Terry, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing very well, thank you, Phil. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh no, thank you for giving me your time today for this chat. So I'm under the impression that at one point you said you didn't want to teach, but now you have a Kinesiology Institute. What happened there? What happened to change your mind? Never say never.
Yeah, I think that is so true. Well, it happened, Phil, when I'd finished my training with Brian Butler, and we all had to do a week. I forget, they used to call it TACT, I think, but I think the Touch for Health do it as well. It's like a residential course. And I wasn't able to get my certificate or diploma until I'd done this, but I really didn't want to do it because I thought I would never teach, and it was really about teaching the foundation kinesiology course. So I can remember actually I stood up because we all had to introduce ourselves. There was probably about, I don't know, 25 people there. And I stood up and I said, I'm Terry Larder and I don't want to teach. And that was in 1989. And so I mean, I absolutely loved the course. The course was fantastic, and I made friends that have been my friends forever. You know, they're long-term friends from there. But it's amazing how life does change, and like you say, never say never. Because it was only about maybe a year later in 1990, my husband's a carpenter and joiner, and there was a big slump in the construction industry then. So we thought, right, I can remember we had this conversation. We were walking by a dump in the middle of the countryside, and I said to him, do you think I ought to teach, because that would bring us some extra income in? So we had this conversation about it, and I had actually been approached by one or two people to say, you know, would you teach, Terry? We don't want to go to London. And I thought, no, I don't want to do it. So anyway, it was that forced me to do it. And so I started to teach the foundation course. What had really concerned me at the time was, I think when I heard Natalie's presentation, she was talking about the fact that in the early days, there wasn't any formal or structural way of learning. And it was like that too when I began. You know, like her, I did loads and loads of different courses, and I absolutely lapped up everything, went to every course imaginable. You know, it was just so exciting. But there wasn't the structure to it, and at that point it was starting to come in. So I went to learn. I went to a college to learn how to put courses together. It was an adult education course, and I felt that really things ought to start to get more structured. And actually that's when I started and joined the Kinesiology Federation around that time. I think it was,
okay. So you joined quite early on then?
Quite early on, yeah.
Right.
It wasn't at the very beginning. It was more like, I should say, maybe a year in, maybe 6 months in, something like that. Brian wasn't too happy with me at the time, unfortunately. So the Kinesiology Federation was great because, you know, it encompassed all sorts of ways of using muscle response testing.
That's brilliant. And so you spent 10 years on the board. So I mean, obviously because you really like that structure, I guess, you know, it was wanting to promote that.
I think, yes, I wanted to promote the structure. I mean, it was a battle. There's no doubt about it. It was a battle, because remember, we were in that kind of transition We're in that transition between, you could do any course you liked and come together and have a lot of knowledge, but it wasn't actually, if you like, recognised officially, or you weren't assessed for it properly. So it was at that stage where people were coming in like myself, but I felt I had to go to other places to learn other things like anatomy and physiology and pathophysiology and nutrition, and those things were not included at the time. It wasn't until later that, you know, those sort of things got included.
Yes, and I mean, from my own experience with the policy board, what you end up with is really strong personalities. It's people who are really passionate about what they believe in and what they're doing. And, you know, it is about, you know, finding those things that suit everybody. But I think because of that, you end up with a really good framework, because everyone is looking for the best way of pushing forwards, either with promoting kinesiology or training, or, you know, getting practitioners out there to be as good as they can be. So yeah, hugely valuable.
And I've seen the Kinesiology Federation grow, of course. You know, it's I went to a meeting a few years ago for some reason, I can't remember why, and you know, I could see that the whole, you know, it kind of like consolidated, it was firmer, it was better, and that takes years for that to happen.
Yes, because you know, everyone's passionate about their own branch of kinesiology, and it can be very easy to kind of be separate and just want to look after your own. And I know from the last conference that we did, how amazing it was seeing everybody coming together, and Sandy Gannon, bless her, she turned around to me and she said, look at all these kinesiologists, they're all just talking together and getting on like it's one thing. And you know, I just thought that was, I thought it was brilliant, but to have Sandy recognize that as well was really lovely.
It was.
So yeah. So did you start with kinesiology, or were you already a therapist? Did you already practice other things before you got into it?
Well, the story basically is that I always have been interested in medical things. You know, at one time I toyed with the idea of becoming a doctor, but I'm glad I didn't go that route. I'm really glad. But my mum was interested. I mean, you know what it's like when you're younger, you don't really take much notice of what your mum says, do you? But then as the years go on, you realize how much, you know, she's affected you for the good.
Can you tell my kids that?
Oh yeah, I often think of her and said, my mum told me that and she was so right. But she used to have Here's Health magazine. And actually I wrote an article in ICAN magazine, or was interviewed for ICAN magazine, you know, that's there, which is like, it comes from Here's Health. Simon Mills, I think his name is, he used to be the editor of Here's Health. But anyway, she used to have the Here's Health magazines, and she was always interested in that sort of thing. But I ended up, for whatever reason, doing something I always said I'd never do, which seems to be the story of my life, really. Because I ended up in an office, and I said I'd never do that. I actually started off as a hospital administrator or trainee hospital administrator. So I ended up in an office doing office work, basically. It's just a posh name for that. And then when I got married, I moved to Melton Mowbray, and I moved to a council office. So I worked for the highways department, and I had a good job there as an administrator. And it kept, at that time, I actually started to get interested in reflexology. This would be 1980. So nobody had heard of reflexology before. And one of my friends had become very ill when she was in Canada. And as a result of that, the family she was staying with brought in a reflexologist who made her feel so much better. And when she was telling me this, I thought, well, that sounds interesting. You know, you wouldn't hurt anybody because you're only just massaging the feet, you know. Although I had to get over that idea of massaging people's feet. I didn't like that idea. And I thought, you know, I wouldn't mind doing that. So I looked, I mean, remember, there wasn't the internet then. And I was trying to find out, well, can I learn this in this country? Have I got to go to the States to learn it or whatever? And I went into a health shop and they got some old magazines and I bought one. And in there was an advert for reflexology. So I went to learn reflexology and everybody was saying to me, just like they do for kinesiology, what's reflexology? Just the same as they now say, what's kinesiology? So I start to learn this, and I'm just absolutely full of it, because, and I get all my friends to come and they all come to my house and have to have their feet done, and there's a chart on the wall on the door, and I was so excited. Anyway, when I finally passed my course, which was not like the course now, you know, it was rubbish in comparison, but we're very well taught, I have to say. And I started to do it. I was working full time and I started to do it in the evenings. And I'm thinking about this in terms of kinesiology really as well, because if you're starting to learn kinesiology, the same thing applies. You know, you're dead excited.
Yes.
You work on as many people as you can. You know, you work in the evenings, even if you're working full time, because you're so excited by it. And as a result of that, eventually I got to the point where, you know, I thought, can I leave my job?
Yes.
Anyway, I went to a reflexology course, an advanced one in London. And I realized that there were some people I just couldn't help. It was starting to come out about ME at that point, and Candida and all that sort of thing. And I just couldn't help those people. So anyway, I was talking to this lady and she says, oh, they're running a course next door. That it's kinesiology. I says, what's kinesiology? She says, oh, well, there are reflex points on the feet. On the body, as well as the feet. I says, oh, are there? Oh, that's interesting. So I boldly go next door while they're in the middle of their training, knock on the door and say, you know, could I have some information? So that was Brian Butler, and he was teaching at that time. So anyway, so there I started with kinesiology as well. So I started to integrate it with my reflexology to start with. And so my clients that came for reflexology then started to have kinesiology, and it got to the point where I never used reflexology at all. It was all kinesiology.
Oh, brilliant.
But in the meantime, at work, I thought, well, I can't, you know, dare I leave work? Which I'm sure a lot of people are in that dilemma. And there was an opportunity for part-time work. So I said, because we actually needed more staff. So I said, look, we need a part-time worker. Can I be it? And so I worked 2 days a week, and I took that instead of getting promotion. So then I got the time then to devote to kinesiology. So I worked a couple of days in my mum's front room, which is now my clinic.
Yeah, which is brilliant, because I mean, it's really scary either having to give up work to do it, but it is that kind of energetic commitment as well. I sort of had a similar situation with work, that my work was actually being reduced as I was doing my training, to the point where they were literally cutting our hours in half, and they cut my hours in half the day after I completed my assessment.
Wow.
So I kind of thought, well, it's the universe doing what it needs, you know. And these things, they tend to work out. But that's brilliant. That's fantastic. So we all have our different ways of describing kinesiology, which are very varied and wide, because it's such a big topic. But how do you describe kinesiology if somebody asks you what it is you do, or what it could do for them?
Well, if somebody asks me you know, sort of like if I'm at a party or something and somebody says, oh, what do you do? I'm a kinesiologist. Oh, what's kinesiology? I'd just say we troubleshoot people's health problems and find the solutions.
Brilliant.
And then they'll either say, oh, that's interesting, and then pass on to something else, in which case I don't say anymore. Why waste my breath? Why give pearls to swine? Since we're talking about pearls. But then they might go on and ask, well, oh, how do you do that? Then I will go on to explain. Otherwise, if you start talking and then you see the glazed look come over,
yeah, you know when you've lost them.
You know when you've lost them, yeah. So I will say, well, it's a case of testing muscle response. So we test either a limb, and we ask people to match our pressure, and we use that as a biofeedback tool, and we're looking for changes. So what we do is we challenge the body by maybe it might be putting a food on the body, or it might be getting the person to touch an acupuncture point, or it might be getting the person to think about something stressful. And then what we do, we watch for changes in that muscle response, and that change tells us that whether the body likes it, what we're doing, or whether they don't like it. As I say, we use it like a biofeedback tool. And then what we do, we apply different treatments, and that can vary. You know, really, it's naturopathic treatments is what I always say, because it could be body work, it could be herbs, it could be emotional work, it could be acupuncture. So really, muscle response testing is the tool we use to find out which type of therapy to use.
Yes, brilliant. I love that you say challenge the body as well, because I think I always think, oh, we're stressing the body, we're finding a stress, but challenge doesn't sound quite so intimidating. So Terry, we sometimes think of muscle testing as a binary response. Either the arm is holding and it's remaining locked, or that muscle is testing weak, for want of a better expression. So we're getting a definitive yes, no, on, off response. But I know you do analog testing, so you're reading that muscle in a different way. Could you give me a bit more information about what that means?
Yes, certainly. I've used analog muscle testing, which is actually one of Alan Sales, the things that he discovered together with other people, actually, because it's been a sort of like an ongoing process finding this out. And I always remember even Sheldon Deal even said, as you said, the muscle test is binary, it's either on or off. But what about the bit in between?
Yes.
Because not everything is a clear on or off, a clear yes or no, a clear good or bad. There are shades of grey. And so what are we testing when we test a muscle that's locked? Is it always 100% okay? Well, really, it's 51% okay, up to 100% okay.
Yes, that makes sense.
Whereas an unlocked muscle could be 49% okay, down to 0% okay.
Yes.
So there's a gap in between that we're missing. And as I say, it's the work of Richard Utt as well and other people. But basically, I find that using analog muscle testing, which is actually simplifies the way we read the responses, but also it enables us to be able to pick up a lot more than we would do with just a binary system. So, like, for example, in the course that I do, I show a 14 muscle balance in binary, and then I show a 14 muscle balance in analog, and you pick up a lot more imbalances. I say a lot more, depends on the person, but
yes,
more imbalances. So you pick up a lot more. Also, I know that every type of kinesiology doesn't always use stacking, but stacking is a good way of if you like, finding out what the stresses are in the body that's actually meant that the imbalance has developed, and you actually can address those at the same time. And it's quite complicated because in binary, you're looking for locked, then unlocked, locked, unlocked, and so on. Whereas it's much simpler in analog to do. So I use nothing else now, to tell you the truth. I only use analog testing because it's so simple, and it's something you can use with any type of kinesiology as well.
Yes.
So yeah, so I do run a course in that.
Oh, brilliant. That's brilliant. So you're, I mean, clearly you're still enthusiastic about kinesiology and what you do, whether it's training or practicing. I mean, what keeps that enthusiasm? Because I think, did I read that you're supposed to be semi-retired? How's that going?
Even with lockdown, you'd think that I would, but mind you, I have had time to do more things. I mean, I've started doing carving and things like that. I've gone on an online course and doing carving. So I am doing other things. But yeah, I mean, I stopped doing the diploma courses because I found that they were quite stressful getting enough people to go on the courses, and also not just the kinesiology course, but we're talking about the anatomy and physiology and so on and so forth. And so anyway, I decided to give that up and concentrate on postgraduate training, which is what I do now. And so I'm putting quite a few courses online gradually, for example, on a proper course platform.
Yes.
So I'm doing a course at the moment on Lyme disease, on Lyme protocols for the kinesiologist.
Oh, okay.
And also on analog muscle testing, which I use. And I'm going to put various ones online. And when we're able to get back, obviously, I will teach them in person as well.
Yes.
But the things that Phil, I've added onto my clinic that have made such a difference to how successful I've been. So I want to share that with others. And that's really, you know, certainly something that I feel passionate about.
Yes.
The other thing is, I've noticed over the years that, again, when you were seeing people working, we can all get a little bit sloppy sometimes and forget where the protocols come from, and also perhaps might do them slightly, you know, we might have forgotten or just misunderstood a protocol.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes things can get watered down, and then that multiplies, and other people see other people doing it and so on and so forth, and you start to get errors coming into how the originators really intended the work. And sometimes what can happen is they then become less successful, you know, they don't be so good, or people are unfamiliar with the process or the rules, if you like, you know, that you have. And then things can get watered down. And I felt, you know, quite strongly about this. So I actually have spent the time finishing my book in lockdown, which is Essential Techniques for Kinesiology Techniques for Muscle Response Testers.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Was that finished in lockdown, or was that something you'd already been in the process of doing?
To do it. Yeah, I'd already started it, but I finished it in lockdown, which was absolutely great because I was able to spend a lot of time on the phone. It was all done on the phone with the designer and so on. It's got little markers in, but there it goes.
Oh, brilliant. That looks huge.
It's it weighs 1 kilo. There's lots of different techniques in it, and yes, and actually it's being sold all over the world at the moment. It's being sold in the States, Australia, the Netherlands, and on my website as well. It's gone very well. I just can't believe they just went like hotcakes originally. I've had to have 3 reprints.
Really?
Sorry,
that's
2
brilliant.
2 reprints.
Okay, that's great. And it's good to get those kind of books out there from experienced practitioners as well.
I mean, I've done a lot of research to look, try and acknowledge as often as I could the people who actually originated the techniques. Sometimes it's not easy to do that because you know, they just you know, evolved in the past. A lot of what we learned was from Sheldon Deal's yearly seminars that he did. Then he used to come to the country, and I mean, they were fabulous. They really were, the techniques that he brought. And they were techniques mainly from applied kinesiologists who had done research, and he would bring the research to the UK. So there was an awful lot of material there, but unfortunately we didn't always know who it was who'd actually originated them.
Yeah, these things sort of move about, don't they? Oh, good stuff. That looks great. So we talked a bit earlier on before we started recording about transformative experiences, and I've been asking my interviewees about big transformations they've seen either in their own lives because of kinesiology, being a practitioner, or the work it's done on, work they've done on themselves, or on their clients or students. So do you have an example of where you've seen a transformational shift because of kinesiology?
Yeah, I mean, when you asked me that question, it was really difficult, because I worked out that I must have seen at least 7,000 individuals over the years, because we're talking 30 odd years now. It could even be more. I only know by looking at the folders that I had to get rid of when we had data protection, and there were thousands of them. So it was hard to pick any out. I think one that sticks in my mind is a lady who had a really heavy period. She was bleeding almost constantly. She was probably in her 40s, but her life was being ruined by it. The medical profession didn't seem to be able to offer her any help. And she actually was the wife of an executive, and she had to entertain quite a bit. And she was at such a state that she was withdrawing within herself, and she couldn't entertain, and she'd become a different person, which obviously it would do, because you'd have a lot of blood loss. So anyway, I mean, basically, it was the reason why I'm giving you this example, because nothing fancy was done, basically. It was just very basic stuff. And one of them was that she had an intolerance to wheat. Okay. And we all know the effects that food can have. Obviously, I'm a big fan of herbs and supplements, the way you do use those quite a bit, but not exclusively. So we did do some work on the emotional side of things, but the big thing that really affected her was the fact that she was intolerant to wheat. And as soon as she cut out the wheat, her life just totally changed. And she became herself again. She was able to entertain. Her blood loss stopped, and she was able to lead a normal life. So much so, she wrote to, I think it was Woman's Weekly, and extolling the virtues of kinesiology. And I was actually interviewed by them, and there was a little article in there.
Oh, that's brilliant. And that's such a good example, I think, of where kinesiology is brilliant, because people think kinesiology is complicated because the word's complicated to say, but quite often it's these small changes that can have a profound effect on someone's life. It can just sometimes be such small adjustments that have the biggest effect.
Absolutely. I can give you another one as well, which shows that it's okay, actually, if you can't help somebody. And that's, I think, an important thing for us to remember as practitioners, that we don't have to know it all. And it's okay to actually send someone to another practitioner or whatever. This young lady came to see me. Her mother brought me. She was a law student, and she was suffering the most terrible migraines. And it was actually hampering her work. She just couldn't work with them. Her heads were so bad. She'd already been to lots of people, including a neurologist, who told her it was all in her mind. And but she was, as I say, devastated, because she couldn't carry on with her degree. So her mother brought her to me, and my first reaction was doing some kinesiology tests that she had low blood sugar. And so that was one of the things that we addressed. And to be honest with you, it made no difference. Even though she seemed to have the problem, it didn't make any difference to her headaches at all. So I started to look at the jaw, temporal and mandibular joint, because that can have a big effect on, in the cranials, can have a big effect on headaches. And I asked her to bite her teeth together, and she had a very big overbite, you know, so her top teeth were over her front quite a lot when she bit together. And she did have a TMJ dysfunction, and I would correct it. But the interesting thing was that every time she bent her head down, which you would do if you were reading, every time she bent the head down, it blew again. In other words, you know, the treatment would not hold.
Yes.
So I had to end up treating her with her head down like this while I addressed what was going on with the jaw. And I said to her, you know, I would recommend that you go to see an orthodontist, because, you know, I think it's something to do with that. And I recommended somebody, and she said, oh, I'll go to my ordinary dentist. And so she went to her ordinary dentist, who didn't think she had a problem, but gave her a splint, which made her 100 times worse.
Wow.
And so anyway, eventually she did go to the orthodontist I suggested, who wrote to me afterwards, and he said he'd never seen such a bad bite problem. So much so that he was actually going to refer her to somebody else in Oxford. So anyway, that was really the last I heard that she was having this treatment. About 3 years later, I got a letter from her, and she says, I just wanted to write and thank you so much that you just saved my life. I could have committed suicide. I felt so bad. She said she'd had this treatment and was much better, but she said, I feel so angry with the neurologists and the dentists and everybody else who wouldn't listen to me, but you listened to me and you found out what the problem was. And she said, I'll be eternally grateful.
Oh, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. And again, it just shows where muscle testing and kinesiology is so useful. Because even though, you know, you had to refer her to somebody else, it's like if she hadn't come to you, that referral wouldn't have happened. You know, you wouldn't have uncovered what you uncovered. And I'm a huge believer in, you know, we only get the clients who we can help. And so even if we're not aware of being able to help them, they've come to us for a reason, and we're doing something that's moving them closer to where they need to be. So that's a brilliant example. Thank you. So we have a lot of members, and some of them work part-time, some of them work full-time, some of them are just starting out. Do you have any advice for our practicing members from your experience? Anything you'd like to share that they could incorporate, or a useful hint or tip for working in practice?
Well, I would encourage people to go on as many courses as they can and learn as much as they can, because that will give you confidence, and you're not going to necessarily use everything that you learn, but you're going to be able to identify the tools you really love and take things out of them, and it will keep your enthusiasm up as well, and your confidence. Yes. So I would definitely encourage that. And I think now that we've got things online, and now we're having to change the way we work, I'm realizing that online courses, it's that you lose something with the fact that you can't practice with people. And as a tutor, you know, I think that's important. But the good thing about courses online is that you can keep going over the videos until you get it right. So there are advantages to that. So I'd encourage people, you know, step outside your comfort zone. The other thing that I would say is, if you're starting out, is forget yourself. When you're working with clients, get over yourself. Don't start thinking, oh, can I do this? Or I want to look good here, and so on. Just take yourself out of the picture, step back and concentrate on the client. I think the most important, I think the thing that you want to be aiming for by the end of the day, you're thinking, did I really exist? Because you're there for everybody else. And then, of course, when they leave, you wash your hands, literally and metaphorically, and go on to your next client. But I think, what else have I written down here? The other thing is that if you're starting out, a bit like the story I gave you earlier about my own journey, that you have to be committed. You know, and obviously people have different circumstances, but when you work for yourself, and not everybody can work for themselves, you know, we're not all cut out to be the same, but you do need to actually spend a lot of time doing it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And again, I guess that's where the courses are useful, because it's about investing in what you're doing. And another thing I was thinking about with courses and workshops as well is, which is a shame when more of them are online, is actually connecting with other practitioners and finding out that, you know, you're not the only one. And, you know, I think, again, from personal experience, I'd been qualified about a year, and we had a situation with our daughter where she was really poorly, and I withdrew from practicing to deal with that, and I wasn't sure whether I would ever get back into it. I, you know, kind of thought maybe that ship has sailed, and I went to do a course with Jimmy Scott, who's the founder of Health Kinesiology, who's doing some training to teach what had been really useful for my daughter. So I thought, oh, I might go on that and just see what it's like. And just actually being in a room full of other kinesiologists and other practitioners, and it was like, oh my God, I'm with my people, you know. And I think it's very easy for us to become isolated and lose faith in ourselves. And I know something else we talked about earlier on was sort of imposter syndrome, that kind of that feeling, I guess, that because we are isolated sometimes, that we forget what we're doing, and actually we're really good at what we do.
I always say to my students, don't wait until you think you can do it before you start practicing.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, you know, they don't know what you're doing. They have not got a clue what you're doing, and you know a lot more than them anyway. So,
yes.
You know, I think that's really important. The other thing I think is important, Phil, is, I know not everybody wants to do this, but I think giving talks is so important, you know, for getting the word out. And it's amazing as well how, and opportunities to teach, even if people can teach a little group of people, even in the house, because that's how word gets out. And I've found that I've had clients from people who, you know, I've heard about me 3 years ago. You know, and it's not always immediate. I can remember I gave a talk at one of the hospitals to a migraine group, and I can't remember what I said or anything, but it's a long time ago. Not one of those people from the migraine group actually came to see me, but interestingly enough, one person who wasn't there, actually she was having a baby at the time, she came to see me. And she became a client, and she actually eventually became my receptionist.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, the thing is, you just don't know how things are spread about. But if you don't put yourself out there, then nobody's going to know about you.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Talks was one of those things that I was never going to do. And and funnily enough, I've always said I'll never teach as well. So we'll see what so because it's our 30th anniversary, we're talking about pearls of wisdom, because pearl represents the 30th anniversary. So I think you're going to do a separate video for us, and there will be a link below this video. But what would you like to do your pearl on?
Well, I think I'd like to do it on the very fundamentals of kinesiology, which is the muscle test. And I'd like to talk about that, just refine it for people, remind people a little bit about it, and how to get your client to respond in the right way to your muscle test, because it's all to do with that as well. It's the be all and end all, really, because we can have all these fantastic techniques, but if we can't muscle test, then we're scuppered, aren't we, completely? And I have to say, you know, when I've been at conferences and you know, or in groups and seen some of the way people do muscle testing, it's going to hamper their whole practitioner life if they can't actually muscle test as well as they might. And so I think actually to review that and to refine our technique, since it is our tool.
Yes. Yeah,
It is our
absolutely.
tool, and it takes a
And
lot of skill.
yeah, it does. And I think, you know, when we start our training, it's obviously the first thing we learn, and it's right there at the beginning. And it can be quite an intimidating process, actually testing somebody else's muscle. You know, it's physical contact. You know, then the great techniques come in, and the techniques are all very exciting. So it can easily kind of get lost, I guess, with that. And like you say, it's the fundamental part of what we do. And actually it is an amazing thing to do. It's a beautiful thing. And, you know, we were talking again earlier on about, because the current situation, you know, we're kind of, it's a shame that we're not working physically with people, you know. So I think it's a perfect time to make sure that we are all doing the best muscle testing that we can.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I must admit, I've been into clinic once, I think. I mean, I know I could have gone in, but I've been in once since lockdown, so I'm sure I'll be rusty as well. So it will be a good review for me too.
Good stuff. So that's brilliant. So anyone who wants to see that video can follow the link. Terry, it's just been such a privilege to talk to you today. I've really enjoyed listening to you, and your enthusiasm for it is just, it's wonderful to see. So thank you for giving us your time today.
You're very welcome. I've enjoyed it too. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you very much.